so much for coming to our Understanding Modular Assessments, grades 6 through 8 science. We're going to get started here. Just some webinar logistics that we have. Thank you so much to the New Hampshire Department of Education. We appreciate them sponsoring this webinar series and a lot of the data coaching webinars that we do have that we've been doing. Without their support, we would not be able to be doing these webinars for you. So we thank you. Everyone is muted, so you don't need to worry. We cannot hear you, but we really would like you to ask questions. If you enter them in the Q&A section of the screen, Annie Wallace is here from the New Hampshire Department of Education, so she will feed me those questions. There's also the Q&A portion, which everybody also sees, or the chat section, that everybody sees as well. So she'll be looking mostly at Q&A, but she'll be checking for both of those, but just know the chat goes to everybody. We will be sending you an email tomorrow that will have the link to the PD certificate. It will also have the information about where the webinar video will be housed. It takes a couple of days for us to update the video, but you'll get a link to where that will be, and the PowerPoint and all the other materials that go along with this particular training today. As we are exiting the webinar, once I close out, a survey will pop up. It's got 4 questions. We really do look at the feedback and want to know how to do better with our webinars, not just this one, but any of them in the future, of what you might want to see for webinars as well. If you have to drop off before I close out, the email that you're getting tomorrow will also have a link to the survey, so you can always do that when you get the email tomorrow. Just a little bit about the team we have here today. I'm Heather Jenkins. We also have Annie Wallace here from the New Hampshire Department of Education.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. We appreciate your time.
And then Katie McCaffrey is not on this call here, but I wanted to make sure she was on the information list here because she's the new English Language Arts consultant at the Department of Education. So just a gentle reminder, I have this for a lot of our modular webinar series, just reminding us that the goal of what we are doing in our classroom is not just to assess students. You know, the modular assessments, they are able to be used as an assessment tool, obviously, but what we're really trying to do is make sure that we are improving student performance, not just assessing it. So we're going to talk about ways here that we can really look at how do we improve student learning, specifically with the modular assessments. So our goals for today is why use them? Why use these modular assessments, right? So we're going to talk about some of the whys. We are also going to talk about, specifically for science, what your options are for the New Hampshire SAS modular assessments. And also looking at those modular assessments to look and understand more at your grade level standards. For science, it's really your middle school science standards, and also how you get to them and how you can administer them. So first things first, I want to talk a little bit about the benefits and how you can use the modular assessments. So first off, they're short periodic assessments that you can do throughout the year. The great news about the modulars that's different than what you would see on a summative assessment and the data that you get from it is that all students get the same questions. So you can really start to pinpoint areas where students are really strong or where they might need to have some improvement. They are based for science specifically on the next generation science standards. And the modular assessments are based on those standard areas of science. So earth-based science, life science, and physical science, but they also have, they align to some of the disciplinary core ideas that are within the next generation science standards. You can administer these assessments anytime throughout the year. There's no specific window, usually starting in the beginning, first, second week in October. All of the modular assessments are available to be administered to your students. And it's a little bit different for science because they are the middle school science standards. The modular assessments are going to be located in the 8th grade portion of the assessment viewing application and for test administration, but they are topics for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So even if you have 6th grade students, technically they're an 8th grade modular because that's when they're tested, but they are on 6th grade science topics. We'll talk a little bit about that. So how they can help you as teachers. They are going to help you measure student achievement. I like the fact that they're automatically scored, so it's one less thing for you to score, and the results are almost immediate on that reporting portal, and again, down to the question level. What we really like about it is if you are using a specific program or you have a specific scope and sequence for teaching, it's helping you evaluate whether your teaching and the impact of your teaching is really resonating with students and showing their growth in learning. And it can also help you understand the child's gaps, their progress, their needs. And this helping determine resource needs, it's not just physical resources of what you might need in your classroom for materials or maybe extensions for students, but it's also the people in your building. So if you have additional folks that are able to help out with specific students for, again, extension, or to be able to really help them solidify skills, you would know which students might need that particular type of help. And they help provide detailed information for instructional purposes. So you can see how students are doing with specific aspects of your standards. And it's really helping you understand a little bit more about your science standards through the next generation science standards disciplinary core ideas within your specific areas of science. So I really like the fact that these particular modular assessments can help you look at not only how effective is our instruction in these particular areas of science, but then also what can we do to make sure that students are able to take their knowledge that they have within our classrooms and apply it to the New Hampshire SAS sort of structure, I guess. For students, this is a big one. That structure can be a barrier for sure of testing, and having students understand how to use the particular platform is great. For science as well, because they're tested in 5th and then again in 8th, and then they're tested in 11th. When they get to 8th grade, yes, they've been doing the New Hampshire SAS summative assessments in grades 6 and 7, and then they get to 8th, but they haven't done a science assessment since 5th grade. So getting them in there and using the modular assessments can give them an idea of sort of what they're going to see on the summatives. It also allows them to practice. Any time that we have a platform or an assessment that we are giving students only every once in a while, the more they're able to practice in it, the better. And so again, it takes away those barriers of testing. This graphic just is a basic overall, sort of snapshot of when teachers are using the modular assessments, their students increase their proficiency on the New Hampshire SAS summatives. It is not necessarily, we're not proponents of teaching to the test at all. It is really more taking away those barriers of testing, understanding what students need to really hone in on for knowledge, and making sure that we are doing the best things that we can in our direct instruction each and every day, so that students can really take that and apply it and show their understanding in other areas. So how these can be used, they can be used as an end of unit assessment. They can be used as a pre-assessment. Modulars can be used as a formative assessment. Okay, we've been talking about this particular subject for quite a while. Let's see how we're doing. What do we need to do in the next coming weeks before we finish up, so they can help you understand where students are now. And then they can also be used as a practice for that summative. And lastly, I really like this specifically with math and science, is being able to project a particular modular question or scenario really for science up on your screen and walking through it with your students so that they can understand what's being asked of them. The science modulars are really, they can trip kids up when it comes to, okay, is this a lab? How do I do this? How do I run this particular information? And what's being asked of me. So the more you can talk about it with students and the more they can collaborate on what might be something that they understand or something that might be a little bit tricky for them to do is going to be really beneficial. Any questions yet?
No, there are no questions at this time.
Okay. All right. So let's just talk about some of your modular assessment options for science. So when it comes to earth and space science, the modular assessments are as follows here. You've got Earth's history, you've got Earth systems, space systems, another space system. So you've got two of those. And then you have, this is the other Earth systems here. So you've got two of these, and then human impacts on Earth systems as well. So they directly correlate here with the ESS 2.1. So you can line them right up with the next generation science standards. So these are what you have for options for Earth space science. These are your life science options for middle school. So you can see that you have a couple of inheritance of traits. You've got matter and energy in organisms. You've got ecosystems, you've got natural selection, adaptation, structure and function, and information processing. And then for physical science, you've got those properties of matter, you've got chemical reactions, wave properties, got a couple of those. You've got forces in motion, and you've got energy. We have created some modular documents that are just really helpful for you to understand what modulars are covering, and maybe sort of how many topics are in a particular modular and what the performance expectations are. So this is the breakdown for Earth and space science. You can see the specific modular options here down the left. Obviously they're covering, it pretty much tells you here, but it gives you the little check marks up at the top to tell you what it's covering. And then underneath here is the performance expectation for that particular modular. So this is Earth space science. This is the same thing for Earth space science. And so what we have here is these are the modular assessments here. These are the performance expectations. And then this little check mark here also tells you what topics are tested on the summative assessments. This says 1819, but I have not heard any changes in what is being looked at current on this past year's summative. Annie and I were just talking beforehand, before we started this webinar, and science is being looked at. Cambium is looking at the number of questions that are being asked on the specific areas of science. And so there might be some changes coming up, but there aren't any changes quite yet. This is the breakdown for life science as well. So you can see, sorry, it's so tiny. You will have all of these documents and materials in your email tomorrow, but we basically have broken down each one of the modular assessments and what the performance expectation is for those as well. This again is that breakdown of, this is the modular assessment here. Here's your performance expectation for life science. And then this is what has been tested on the spring summatives. Physical science, same breakdown. You've got up at the top, you've got your information here about the breakdown of the specific modulars and then the performance expectations that go along with that. And then last, physical science, again, modulars, got your performance expectations here, and then it correlating with what is tested on the summative assessments. So I just wanted to talk a little bit too about whenever we're working with science, most science teachers are familiar with their content area in the next generation science standards. But I also wanted to make sure that as science teachers, we are aware of our standards for literacy as well. So for middle school and for high school, there are reading standards for literacy in science and technical subjects. So I just wanted to show you a little bit about what you're seeing. So this is key ideas and details and craft and structure. So this is your reading standards that you're also supposed to be aware of. And then the same thing, this is the same for reading. And then this is the integration of knowledge and ideas and range of reading and level of text complexity standards for science and the technical subjects. Also, for middle school science, you have writing standards. So this is for history, social studies, science, and technical subjects. So for your writing standards, you have text types and purposes here. This is text type and purposes continued. And then these are the production and distribution of writing, research to build and present knowledge, and range of writing. So most of you might already be aware of this. There are times where I run into folks and they aren't aware of the reading and writing standards, or basically your literacy standards for science. So I just wanted to point you in the direction of those. With science, there are also the New Hampshire Department of Education has model competencies. This is just an example of one page. You have the full handout of pages. It's right off of their website here, but these are the K-8 science model competencies that have been created that might help you also in your instruction. I'll just pause right there and make sure there's no questions.
There are no questions at this point.
Okay, great. All right. So moving on, let's talk about what an example of a modular assessment would be. So we are not allowed to really take the exact information from the modular assessments. We're not allowed to do screenshots because they're copywritten. So this is something that is an example. This is one of the sort of practice questions that they have. So they typically have some sort of passage or some information. This here is an arrow that would be able to have them make it open on the whole page, or you just see the first half the page. So this is just a little bit of a snapshot. They might have to scroll down. So it's something to really be having students understand how to navigate that page of, there's information on the left-hand side. And also, it should be noted that the information on the left-hand side is a general bit of information about what they're being asked to do, but it's not all the information that they need, because a lot of times with these science modulars, they need that prior knowledge that you've taught them for that particular area of science to be able to even look at this particular task and understand what to do with it. So it's a little bit tricky sometimes, because just like with ELA, they have to learn certain aspects of how to find key ideas and details, or how to find information and what good information to use from a passage to be able to answer questions for English or language arts. It's the same thing for science. They have to have those basic understandings of the science concepts to be able to do the information that's being asked within a modular assessment. So this is just an example again of a passage. The students will read the passage or read the information on the left, and they will be asked to do different things depending on the modular. The questions might have them doing something like this here, which is they are, there's a variable for a vertical axis for graph A. So you can see here that they've got the information here. Sometimes on this side, they might be doing a little bit of an experiment, and they might have a couple of different options of how to calculate something. So this particular one, this has, you know, a drop-down list of options of how they would answer this particular question. This is, again, some of that information for part, this is now the vertical axis of graph B. So they have some question or answer options here as well. Some of the questions are a little bit more interactive than others. This is for graph C. So they're getting all different scenarios here, and they're having to apply what they know about this particular area of science to be able to answer the questions. And then this here, again, this is something that might be a little bit different than what you're able to really replicate in your classroom. And this, they're having to answer multiple portions of a question, and these happen to have drop downs here where they would have to be putting in the information. But a lot of what I find on the science modulars is that the information that they're answering is really variable. You know, it is something that, depending on how they answer one portion of the question, their answers to the next part of the question will change dependent on their sort of interpretation of what they're doing for either an experiment or for answering questions. Any questions there?
Nothing at this point, thank you.
Okay. All right. So the assessment viewing application is something that I'm going to be explaining next. It is just that. It is where you view the modular assessments. That's why it's called the assessment viewing application. Just a little bit of information about how to get there. This is the link to there. If you just type in New Hampshire SAS, like NHSAS, the Cambium website will pop up. It will be your first option, but it will bring you right to this home page. And then on this home page, you want to choose test administration. Or if you scroll down a little bit on the home page, it will look like this, and you can choose test administration right on that home page. It's really up to you. There's a couple different ways to get there. Once you're on the test administration page, as you scroll down, you see this preparing for tests, and this is the assessment viewing application. When you click on assessment viewing application, it will want you to log in. So the thing that I want to remind you of is, I'm going to go back to this here. Before you can get into the assessment viewing application, or before you administer any of these assessments, you have to do the test administration certification. It is something that you have to do every school year. So even if you just did it in, let's say, April, because you were somebody who administered the summative assessments, You still have to do it for this particular school year. So it's once per school year and it takes about 25 minutes. You answer the questions and then you're able to get into the assessment viewing application. You're able to get into the test administration page so you can administer these assessments. And then you're also able to get into the reporting portal, but you have to do that certification first. So as you log in, you'll have your login every once in a while. It's the first time in a year you have to go through those steps of making sure that you have a new password for this particular school year. And then once you're in the assessment viewing application, you're able to use the drop-down menu to choose your specific modular assessments. Again, for middle school, the science modulars are located in grade 8. So if you chose grade 6 or 7, you will wonder where the science modulars are. Because it's tested in grade 8, they're all listed in grade 8. But again, grade 6 and 7 students can take the grade 8 modulars. So once you're in the science modulars, this is what it would look like in the assessment viewing application. You can see there's some Braille ones mixed in right now. Usually Braille is in a separate spot. This is a current screenshot here. I just wanted to make sure that you saw it. I also want to point out here, as you're looking at the science modulars, you can see it says start interim. The science modulars, even though they're really like a modular or kind of a benchmark assessment, they're called interims. They are on your specific core disciplinary ideas. So they're not super long, like an interim. If you're somebody who's administered those at the a couple of years ago, we had to do those. Those were a little bit longer. These science ones, these are your modulars, even though they say interim. I just want to point that out because it can get a little bit confusing. So you would choose your specific modular, and then it would open that modular and you could scroll through those particular questions.
I am not seeing any questions at this point, Heather.
Great, thank you. So again, assessment viewing application, that's where you view them. You would be able to preview it and see if it's something that your students would be ready for. And then you would go to actually administering the assessment. You can put your questions up and you can do a science modular with your students in your classroom all through the assessment viewing application. You can walk through it, you can have them collaborate, you can talk about how you would answer questions, and you can do all of those things. If you actually want to administer an assessment and give it to your students to take, this is what we're going to go through next, is this test administration section. So you're logging into that same portal, just type in NHSAS, it comes up with this particular link, and then you're going to choose that test administration again. When you scroll down a little bit further from the preparing for test, you're going to see this administering test, and you're going to see the test administrator interface. You'll click right on that. Again, you have to log in. If you haven't done the test certification course, it will not let you log in. It will not let you administer a modular or anything. So you got to do that first. It will bring up this screen and you'll be able to choose the type of session that you would like to create to administer the modular. I do want to go live here because it's a little bit easier to explain it when we're live on the New Hampshire SAS portal here. So I'm on test administration. I'm going to go down to the bottom. I'm going to go to this test administrator interface. I'm going to log in, and then here is my page here. I have right now an active session open, but this usually what happens with active sessions is this right now is not open. It's not going. When we create an active session, we click start a new session. This is what most folks are used to when they administer a summative. So you click here, we're going to choose science because we would like a science. We're going to choose interim. And you want to make sure to keep clicking on the plus until there isn't one anymore. If you don't, it will give you every single modular that's in this particular list. It will bring it all over to the right-hand side. So if I would have done this, all of a sudden now I have all of the modulars that are listed there. I don't want to administer all of those. So I want to clear it. I'll click on this plus, and let's say I want to do, let's see, we'll do Earth and Space Science. And so what will happen is I'm going to click on this Start Live Session. If you've ever administered a summative, this is that session ID that the students need. And then the students also need their name as it's spelled in TIDE, it's their first name, and then their SSID. They will need to be able to do this particular modular. It's the same as if they were logging in for a summative, but you just don't need the secure browser for the modulars. They don't need a secure browser set up for that. So if I had given this to my students and my students were able to log in, I would then start to see students that I would need to approve to be able to get into the session, and they could start taking the modular assessment. When I'm done, I want to stop the session, and that way students won't be able to continue testing. I click stop. It basically says, are you sure? Yes, I am. And I say, okay. And then that test session is closed. I won't use this session ID again. If my students hadn't finished it, I would open up another active session the next time I saw them, and they would be able to continue working on their science modular there. I'm going to leave here and I'm going to go back in this way. It's a little bit easier. So what I want to talk about now is we've talked about the active session. This upcoming session, this is actually one that I created last week. But as we create upcoming sessions, folks like this because it uses the same test session ID every time they go into have the students going in. So if they know it's going to be over multiple days, it's nice to be able to have the same session ID. So you can schedule a session. What ends up happening is it will give you a start and end date. So in this, I can create a period of time. If I know I'm going to have students working on this and I know it's going to be over the next week, I could say, okay, I'm going to start this next Thursday and I'm going to give myself, a week to get my students in this testing figured out. So then you click next. And then again, you're going to choose the type of assessment that you want. So you'll choose whichever one you want. And so I might just name this ESS 2, just so you know, you cannot put this dash in here. So I would just maybe put a space 5, and I could save this particular session. This is going to be my test session ID. I don't need to worry about it right now, but this is my upcoming session. So it's not showing up right now in my active sessions because I'm starting it tomorrow. So if it were tomorrow, this would now move to where my active sessions are, and then I'll need to join the session, but this allows me to use that same ID. So I'm going to edit this and just change this and say I want to start it today, because I'll show you it will no longer be here because now I'm in the window, and so it becomes one of my active sessions. So this is the active session. What ends up happening is this is where it gets a little bit confusing, is you're seeing it here and you're thinking it's an active session. Maybe the students had started it and they already knew the session ID and they went to go in and they're going to say no sessions are available. And you're, as a teacher, are going to say, well, no, it is. It's sitting right here. But the reason that it says no sessions are available is because this now needs to be an active session. I need to join it to make it active. And then I have my specific session ID, students could log in and I would approve them the same way. So really the only difference with an upcoming session and an active session is that I've got a range of time, and I'll be able to use the same test session ID. But the experience is the same. You still need to approve students. You have to join the session. You have to make it active to be able to have students join that session.
Heather, I have a few questions.
Yeah, I was like, Annie, I'm seeing a few questions, so I'm going to pause there before I move it to at-home assignments.
Right. So the first question is there a way to get a report of the answers that could be used when projecting and practicing with the whole class? Or do the answers only show up when students actually take the modular and we get their score and question results?
It is after they take it, you get the score and question results. There is no answer key at this point. And it really has everything that anytime we've ever asked, and Annie, you know this too, is that it's really a test security thing, that they don't want necessarily answer keys out there.
Or the questions must stay within the secure testing area of the classroom.
Yes.
Another question is, in the assessment viewing application, what is the difference between interims and the tests?
So the interim is where the science modulars are. It is a little bit confusing because the other modulars, like for math and ELA, they're listed underneath. They're listed as modulars, or they're listed as benchmarks. The science ones are just listed as interims. It is not the summative. The summative window isn't open at all. So once the summative is, it would be listed underneath the science summatives. You would know the difference. So the interims is really sort of that quick, shorter, based on your disciplinary core ideas in science. They're called interims. Yeah. But you can see them through the assessment viewing application.
The summatives won't open until March.
Exactly. Yeah.
What is the share link feature for the active session? Is that something we can copy into Google Classroom?
I do not believe that this works in the Google Classroom for this to come up. It might have changed, but the one that you're able to share in the Google Classroom is more this at-home assignment. And that is one where you don't need to approve students to be able to go into it. Unless you know anything different, Annie, I don't believe we can actually share this link for the upcoming sessions, but I am not 100% on that. I know that when these first came out as an upcoming session, we weren't able to use that particular portion of the feature.
Right, and I haven't heard anything different at this point.
Okay.
And another question.
Mm-hmm.
Do they need to log in with their individual login information to take the interim assessments?
Yes. Yep. They need, again, that session ID, then they need their first name and their SASID.
And then the last question I have at the moment is there a report of question results that the teacher can print after the students take the modular?
Yes, there are reports, and I'll get to that just after I get to the at-home assignments. So hold tight on that one. I will get to what it looks like in the reporting portal.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, so the last way to administer a modular assessment is with this at-home assignment feature. This at-home assignment function, basically what this lets you do is it does let you just administer the assessment. They don't have to be at home. They can be sitting right in front of you in your classroom, but it's just easier because you don't have to approve students. You are able to use the link to be able to put it up in your Google Classroom so that students will automatically just have, when they go to log into the test, it will automatically populate that session ID for them, and then they just put in their criteria to be able to answer the questions. So to create it, you can create this for up to a 2-week window. So as soon as I could start it today, and then I could say, okay, I want to go for 2 weeks. I click next again. I'm choosing science. I'm choosing the interns, and I would choose my specific interim that I would like. And then I give it my session. So middle school, physical science, and it's 2-4. And then I save assignment. This is what I can put up in my Google Classroom or in Canvas or wherever you are, whatever you're using for your school. And they'll click right on it and it will bring up the test page for them and insert this into the session ID for them. This is now open because it's today. So students, if they had that link, again, if I didn't look at it then, I can click share link anytime. I like this a lot because it just feels a little less cumbersome than approving students to come in, and it's just one less step. And then let's say I was doing this in my classroom with my students today and they were taking it, and then I didn't necessarily want them to be able to do it at home, or I didn't want this window open. I noticed that kids were going in later and they were, taking the test again, or doing other things. I can edit this and I can change it, or I can delete it completely as soon as I'm done with it. So it doesn't have to stay open for that particular amount of time. But this is a session. I won't see where students are in the testing. I won't be able to see who's through question whatever like you do on the active sessions or the upcoming, but it's a nice way to be able to administer a modular assessment without it feeling so cumbersome. Okay. All right. Any questions there before we move on to the reporting portal?
There are no further questions at this point.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so the reports. This is a great thing. Once your students are finished, the results are available. They have the detail down to the question level. And for science, it breaks it down into the performance level descriptor. And we're working on getting the reporting to be really streamlined. I know that Cambium's been working on it because it was a little bit tricky to figure out which portion of a question related to a specific result. So I know that they're working on the performance level descriptors and the mapping of that, but you will be able to get the detail of that in the reporting portal. And then obviously you can use it to help you figure out what some of the areas that students are really rock solid in, and other areas that we might need to help improve. So going right to that portal again, that test administration, then keep going down, and now we are in the reporting system. So as soon as you click on this, you will need to log in and it will bring up this dashboard here. Again, if you haven't taken the certification, you can't get into the reporting. The other thing that I would like you to understand about the reporting portal as well is that if you are a teacher within TIDE, so you're not a school administrator or you're not a district test coordinator, you're a teacher access level, you will need your students to be rostered to you so that you can see the results. You'll be able to administer the science modular assessments until the cows come home, but you won't be able to see any data for the students if you don't have your roster set up. So just make sure that your administrators know that the rosters need to be set up so that you can view the data. This is the new dashboard. When you log in, you'll have to choose what your particular default selection is. I have right here on this side. It is not, see how there's the interim, ELA, and math? Those are the really long assessments for ELA and math that go with every domain of math for a specific grade level, and every reading literature, reading informational text, writing, all of that. The science, though, this interim is a modular. So again, I apologize for it's confusing, but you want to be able to choose science underneath that. You can see up at the top those benchmark ELA and math. Those are the ELA and math modulars. The science is underneath interim.
Heather, could you quickly just review how to get into the dashboard again?
You are going right to that portal, choosing test administration. You scroll down all the way to the bottom. This is where we administered. Above this was the assessment viewing application. So now we're going into reporting. And here we are. So you're going to choose science, and then you're going to choose go to dashboard. And this is what you will see if you just have the science modular assessments up. So once you're here, you want to choose the interim science, and then it will open up all of your interim assessments here. And then you can choose whatever one that you want to see for your science modular, and then it will bring up something that looks like this. I've cut all the student names off and all of the information. So here's what you see for the reporting example. So here's all the information about which questions you're talking about and what's being asked of students. If you wanted to know what one of these is, you can click on this little I symbol to better understand the skills needed, and it will open up what it's asking students to do for that particular question. This is where I was talking about those performance descriptors. So then you're also able to see an overall score for how a student scored, and then it will open up, you'll be able to open that up and see what each portion of the question asked and what the answers were for that. You can also take a look and see what this tends to be district, and then this is school, this particular set of data. There's only one school in the district for middle school. So this tells you what your overall score for your students was. So they're scoring just below a 5 on an 8-point assessment. And then this is your, the correct answer frequency for each particular question. So you could see like, okay, this one, we're having a little bit of a tough time on this. I would click on the I, what is this indicating? And what might I need to be doing? This overall score is where you're going to be able to see, it would be here as well. You'd be able to see what each portion of the question was and what the answers are. If you download your report, this is what it looks like. You click your little print button, and then you want to make sure you choose summary and item scores, and then you save it to Excel so that you can get this general information here. Again, all of the student information is broken off here, but you would see the students, you would be able to see how many, what their overall score was and how they scored on each portion of the modular. Questions about that?
There are no questions currently. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is I want to go into some of the other New Hampshire SAS resources that are available. So again, I'm going right to that New Hampshire SAS portal, and this time I'm going to click on resources. It's also on the bottom of any page that you look at. There's this little resource bar at the bottom if you want to get in from any page that you might already be on. And then here's how you can look at resources. So you can look at the resource type on the left. You can search for a specific resource, or you can use this little drop-down list, and it will give you some of the information where you can filter some of the results that you're seeing. Some of the resources that we find helpful are the performance level descriptors. These are specific documents that tell us what students need to know at your grade level. So this is an example of a science performance level descriptor document for middle school. There's 2 pages of this. This is just the first page. And so what this is telling you is this is your area here that you would be looking at. And then this is what it's asking of students to be able to do. This is where we're talking about they're updating some of this because they were cross-referencing some of the documents. So we're working on being able to get the full documents for performance level descriptors up there. And Annie, you might have a better understanding of whether the documents now for science are the latest and greatest, or if they're still working on some of the performance level descriptors for that. Do you have any word on that?
They are currently still working on those, so
Okay.
stay tuned.
Okay, sounds great. I wanted to point you in the direction, there isn't a science vocabulary list at this point, but there is a math vocabulary list and an ELA vocabulary list for each grade level. I put it in here because a lot of times with science, you overlap with some of these content areas. So I thought it would be good for you to be able to see some of the vocabulary that students will run into at your grade level for both ELA and for math.
I also, Heather, think looking at the modulars also gives you an idea of the vocabulary they like to use and how they like to use it.
Exactly. That's great. Thanks, Annie. So the last thing I want to show you are these item type tutorials. You might already know about these. Sometimes they're really good tutorials for students specifically before taking the summatives, but they would also be helpful before taking the science modulars. So we're on the site here. This is the front page, and this is for students and families. And then you can also look at it on the resources page, the item type tutorials. And these are some of the examples of what you might see, like an equation response, evidence-based selected response, grid item. There's a whole bunch of different tutorials in here. For the most part, they're pretty quick. They're not any more than a couple of minutes, but it just helps students navigate the assessment portal a little bit easier. And then this practice site is where they have those full practice assessments that students can do for ELA math and for science. Any questions on that?
No, there are no questions at that point, but I was just thinking when you were talking about the practice tests, that's a good place too to have students just go in and play around with the options they have for universal tools.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right. So just a little bit of wrap up. We've got a couple more webinars coming up. These next two webinars, if you have colleagues that you know that are high school or lower grade levels, the modulars there have been some additions to the modulars for ELA and math for high school and for K-2. High school has always had science modulars. So we'll be talking about ELA, math, and science for high school. And then the modular assessments, kindergarten is still not quite there yet, but they have grades 1 and 2. So we'll be having a webinar on that coming up. And again, we would love your feedback. As soon as I close out, you will get a pop-up of I think it's a 4-question survey. And we would love your feedback. And then if you don't get it then it will be in your email. And then this is our contact information. If you get in there and you have any questions and you think, okay, I need just a little bit of clarification on something, you can always email me and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And I know that Annie and Kate are also available to be able to answer any of your questions as well. So I appreciate everybody coming, and we'll wrap up for now. But again, reach out if you have anything.